Good afternoon and welcome to my message of the day. I'm Warren, the rector here at St. Columba's. In the Synoptic Gospels, that's the Gospels Matthew, Mark and Luke, the miracles of Jesus are seen in terms of power, if you like, God's dynamism in bringing the kingdom into the world and breaking through Satan's rule. And we see this in a number of places. Explicitly, I think of that miracle where Jesus heals a woman on the Sabbath and then in response to those who don't like it says that she'd been bound by Satan for 16 years or something, and now he'd healed her. What was the problem? But again, it was a sign that God's power was breaking through the power of Satan. In the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, Jesus is also suspicious of those who wanted to see the miracles as signs, in which we might think of it as sort of like a proof, as though that was the function of the miracles, that would just prove who he is or something. And at one point he says, actually the only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah, which is a reference to his death and resurrection. In John's Gospel, miracles are treated a little differently. In John's Gospel, Jesus talks about his miracles as works, and the narrator in John's Gospel calls them signs. And signs, as signs, they point to something else. But in our reading last Sunday, we had the reading of the feeding of the 5,000 in John's Gospel. You could read that in chapter 6 of John's Gospel, the first section there in chapter 6. And at the end of the miracle, after Jesus has done it, the people are so impressed by this sign that they think he's the prophet who is to come. And they're in a way, they're using it. Well, that's not an adequate response to the miracle, because they think it means something which is inadequate. In John's Gospel, the signs, the miracles of Jesus point beyond themselves. So they see the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 as a fulfillment of the promise of Moses that God would send another prophet to them, just like him. Well, they see this feeding as though it's a new feeding like the manna in the desert. So this really is the prophet, is it? And Jesus actually doesn't like that and avoids them because they want to make him king. What the miracle, the sign, understood correctly means goes beyond their expectations about whatever the prophet would do or whatever is being done. It goes way beyond that. And that's what we're going to get in the next 3 weeks, Sunday by Sunday. He has this great long discussion with the crowd about what the miracle of the feeding, the sign, what it meant. And he talks about it as a sign of his death and resurrection, his glorification in John's Gospel, that the true bread that comes from heaven, the bread that will give life, is his death, his flesh and blood, or his flesh. That is his death. And he says that his death will bring life. So it's like the feeding of the 5,000 in John's Gospel, this sign, which people misinterpreted into the sort of the expectations they already had. It's a sign that is an anticipation, if you like, of the spiritual life that Jesus, his death and resurrection, his ascension and the giving of the Spirit, the life that will come through his glorification. And they don't get it. And that's why he teaches. And we get this through John's Gospel. Not everyone misunderstands, but often there's a misunderstanding, an opposition of some kind, and then Jesus teaches the meaning of his miracles, that is his signs that go beyond what people think they mean. And his 7 signs he's got seven signs, 7 miracles in John's Gospel. That's another difference between John and the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke. In Matthew, Mark and Luke there are lots of miracles. In John's Gospel there aren't very many at all. There's only about 7. There's a couple of healings. There's the water into wine. There's the feeding of the 5,000, the walking on the water. Jesus cures a blind man, and he raises Lazarus from the dead. They're the 7 signs that, when correctly understood, they point beyond our usual expectations of perhaps some kind of proof to the spiritual life that Jesus will give in his life, death, and resurrection, in his death and resurrection and glorification. Which is why, now I know I'm giving a lot of information here, you could replay this and just have another listen, which is why in John's Gospel, in John chapters 1 to 11, those 7 miracles, those 7 signs appear. And then after that, we have no more signs, no more miracles, because you're getting the real deal. You don't need a symbol for it, so to speak, a miracle, a sign, because you're getting the real deal of his death and resurrection. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.